Welcome back, Cal listeners. This is Methodical Millions, where you can better your future and better yourself. Cal, we've got another awesome guest with us today. So everyone listening, please welcome Boris Vujanovic, all the way from Calgary. How's it going, Boris?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
So I wanted to ask a question. What gets you excited about life?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I don't know. Still trying to find that one kind of specific big goal in life. I love what I do, and every day is like a new adventure. So I'm just happy to get up every single day and kind of see how I can improve my business, improve myself, and just kind of do better each day.
Right on. Do you think everyone loves what they do? How do you find out what that is? And did you always have that, or did it take like a discovery process?
Yeah, so I'd say most people definitely do not love what they do. I think the kind of meme we grew up with was you go to school, get a job you hate, and then you just kind of do that and live on the weekends. And unfortunately, I think that's the reality for a lot of people. Um, Honestly, I think it's really hard to find something you enjoy. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to trying different things until you do find it. Because it is a discovery process. You're not going to get, if you're an employee, you're not going to get that first dream job probably right away out of school or whatever. So, it might take a while of either searching for different companies or even different industries or whatever. And on the business side, I think it comes down to a little more in the way you organize your business as opposed to what your actual business is. But that again is a learning process. It's going to take a while to figure out, how can I structure my business in a way that I actually enjoy getting up every day and working on it.
Yeah. And do you have a business background, or did you just start something on the side? What was that process like where you decided, hey, I'm going to go do this full time and be a business owner?
Right. Yeah. So no, I don't have a business background at all, and I can give you the story. It's a little long, so I apologize, but I do want to give you the context on it, just kind of show listeners, you don't have to be a business person to get into running a business. Um, so my background is actually in biology, and long story short, I had the summer job I was doing for an environmental science company. Basically, I was more or less like a report writer. So I would take all the information that came in and distill it to the reporting that would go to the client as part of their application for development approvals. So in 2015, when the price of oil crashed, that whole company disappeared. And that was the year I was going to graduate, going into that job full time. So that disappeared. There were no jobs in my field at all. And I had no idea what to do. At this point, I had never even thought of running a business. It just wasn't something I just considered at all. I just didn't know anything about that. So my dad said, "Hey, why don't you come work for me for a little bit?" Because he had an admin person that was leaving. So I said, "Sure, why not? Just something to do in the meantime." It wasn't unpaid, so it's not like a cushy, family job where I'm just handed whatever role. No, I basically was volunteering for my dad, and he's kind of the classic, really, really good at his job kind of guy, but doesn't know anything about the business side. So I thought to myself, well, if I'm kind of stuck here for now, I might as well try and learn about business. So I just basically spent that year just searching and Googling and reading whatever I could. Sort of fell into learning more about SEO that kind of resonated with me, and came across a group of guys running cleaning companies. So not unlike kind of what you see on Twitter now, with just a bunch of guys sharing their experience and their journeys. And just sort of after a while thought, hey, this is kind of similar model to the driving school. So that's my dad's company. So the driving school. Similar sort of service business. And I was basically, reading what these guys were sharing. I was kind of thinking hey, I have some experience now running a driving school. I know a little bit about marketing now. And these guys have really shared their kind of operations playbook. So why not give it a shot? And so that's kind of what I did. Spent $200 getting the website set up and whatever. And within a month, I think the company was ready and just kind of ran with it from that point.
Right on. Congrats, first of all, because I think whenever the sky falls down, and it seemed like it did, right? Because you were sold a dream of getting a good job out of school, and then the world collapsed basically in the local area. So I think it takes a certain personality to say, well, what's the next step? Because I think people do give up and then they just say, okay, life's not going my way. So kudos to you. Was it through Twitter? We had Bryant on the show. I don't know if you know Bryant at all. We just had him on with his cleaning business, which was cool, very insightful. What was the spark that made you choose that? Was it through Twitter or was it online? I love how you started it for $200. It's really cheap. So what was the first idea of saying this might work? And then also, what was your first customer like?
Yeah, actually, just listened to Brian's episode. Really enjoyed it. So well done on that interview. But to answer your question, so it was on Facebook, and there's still quite a few cleaning groups on there. They're really good if you're in the industry. There's lots of good information shared. So I would recommend joining if anyone's in the industry or looking to join. But basically, just like seeing how these other guys who were sharing their stories were able to do it, and it wasn't like one or two guys. It was like a group of guys that were doing it. So I just sort of thought to myself, like, if they can do it, I can at least give it a shot. And I didn't really expect it to grow the way it did. Like, I was sort of like, oh, if it works out, cool. If not, at least I kind of learned something new. But in terms of the first customer, so my approach was always to be like digital first. So had to have a nice looking website that was professional, had to have the online booking so that customers could just book by themselves. And then I really attacked the SEO from the start. And the SEO took a while, but it's kind of one of those things that you have to, start sooner than later, or you should start sooner or later because it does take a little while to ramp up. So you're not going to see customers right away, but after 6 to 8 months of consistently working on it, it will actually pay dividends. But the first customer probably came from either Google My Business or Yelp, because those were kind of the two review platforms I focused on first. And I think it was just like a random one-time deep clean initially. I think that first month we did like $1,000. And then next month was like a little bit more. And so along the way, we kind of started picking up the recurring as well. And that's really when the business started to sort of build itself.
Right on, man. Congrats. I'll give you like the short version for everyone listening. So in June, I actually started cutting lawns because I needed to cut mine for my Airbnb. And I moved to the Hamilton area about a year ago and I couldn't find anyone. So I was like, I'm just going to do this. And then I said, well, who else needs theirs cut? I put an ad on Kijiji and, I ended up about into the end of the season with a couple contractors who work with me. And I'm basically hands off, but I'll do all the invoicing. And that was my primary source. But as we moved into like leaves, cleanups, and things like that, I asked my best customers to leave me a Google review. So I had a couple of reviews. I was on Google right at the end of the summer, and I got my first organic booking, which was someone who called me and she wanted a quote. So yeah, I find that, if you're going to do this, these little milestones like mean everything, right? So I'm like super excited that someone actually called me and we got the work done. So if you don't mind, can you share some things about SEO you learned that are useful? So if someone wanted to kind of replicate your success, and what were like the 2, 3 things in SEO that you found were important to focus on?
For sure, yeah. And also like really good work on your end too. Like a lot of people I think kind of spin their wheels being like, oh, what business should I do? How do I market it? Blah, blah. And you just kind of like dove into it, which in the service industry is exactly what you should do because it is so straightforward and there's people looking for those services. So yeah, it's literally just like, get up some sort of contact type page or something, find a provider, and that's, you're good to go. But in terms of SEO, there's kind of, at least in local SEO, so there's kind of two main types of SEO. So you have local SEO, so that's, like any sort of brick and mortar type service, or like a service where you go to the client. So exactly like cleaning or lawn care. And then you have more like national SEO, which is more like e-commerce, stuff like that. So the approaches are a little bit different. Luckily, local SEO is a little more straightforward and generally less competitive just because you're being split up by geography. So it's not everybody, trying to rank onto one page. It's, everyone trying to rank for Calgary, everyone trying to rank for Hamilton, et cetera. So it's a little more accessible. But kind of the couple main things for SEO is, so part of with the website, I wanted to be really nice in terms of like the customer experience, but it also needs to be nice for SEO. So what that means is basically it needs to have, ideally fairly clean code, which you're never going to get if you're using a website builder, but there's better website builders. So for example, I don't like Divi. It is very, very bloated in just the way that they kind of have it set up that when you're building the pages, if you ever want to change away from it, like it's just a complete disaster and it's really messy. So I recommend Elementor for anybody looking to create a website. It's pretty good in terms of speed. It's really clean in the way they actually render all their widgets and whatever. I don't actually know that stuff. I'm not a developer. Um, but basically, you want it to be readable by Google. So when they crawl the website, they need to be able to access like literally everything. So that's like everything from the content, so the text that you've written, to the images, which they can't actually see images. So you should also write the alt text for the images. And if you're using WordPress, it's going to basically walk you through every time you paste an image. It's going to be like, okay, like what's the name, what's the caption, what's the alt text, and then also even just like more background stuff like JavaScript and something called schema, which is like sort of like an additional little information section for Google that the user's not going to see. Basically, all that technical on-page stuff has to be, done to the best of your ability to present it to Google. That's kind of the first step. If Google can't read your website, they're just going to skip it. And if they don't read it, you're never going to actually be entered into their index, and so you're never going to rank. Other than that, you want to make sure that your pages are actually targeted to not only your service, but also your location. So I see a lot of cleaning company websites where, they talk about house cleaning and move outs and whatever, and they never actually say where they operate. And so the problem with that is that if I'm a client and I land on your website, I actually have no idea. And one thing I've learned in running this business is that you kind of have to assume that people don't read or don't know in general. And so you have to give as much information as possible and make it easy for them. So not only will the client probably get confused and leave, Google has no idea where you are. So if you're trying to rank, for cleaning in Toronto, we just say house cleaning, you're never going to rank. It's less competitive, but it's definitely still competitive enough that if you're not, really giving Google the information they need, you're never going to make it onto the first page or the map ranks. So you need to have really good content for the actual services, and then it actually helps to have blogs as well. So basically you want to talk about like tips and tricks, that kind of stuff, because that'll help drive traffic to the blog, which then raises the authority of the entire website. And it gives Google further information that you are the actual subject matter expert. So, if I say, okay, we clean houses, Google's like, okay. But then if I say like, we have 30 blogs on, for example, like different methods or different chemicals or different like, safety blogs for chemicals, stuff like that, they're gonna be like, oh, okay, like you actually understand the topic that you're talking about. And so that kind of ties in together. And then kind of last really big one is getting links from other websites to your website, which are called backlinks. Probably the number one most important factor and the hardest to do because other people have to do it for you. And you're technically not supposed to ask for them per the Google guidelines, but I mean, it's kind of like if you don't ask, you're never gonna get them. So you just have to be careful with kind of how you go about it. And that's like another separate topic entirely. It's kind of a little more advanced SEO, but in general, like the more backlinks you can get, the better it's going to help you rank as well.
Those are actually very, very interesting points because even for me, like I'm not into this as much. Usually John handles the web aspect of our podcast as well, but it's very interesting to see how things like this, all the small things that you mentioned really add up. Some seem quite obvious, like you mentioned, for example, mentioning the location of where you are, it helps narrows down the search and how you rank within your area. So maybe for some businesses, they might forget or overlook that. They don't think it's much of a big deal. They just think that people would search and based on maybe a certain method that Google can narrow it down. But it's very, very interesting to see those things and especially how maybe intelligent this way is basically by, adding videos or blogs and showing really your knowledge and sharing it. And that helps drive traffic to the website. So very intriguing.
Yeah, right on. That's super insightful. So a couple questions, I guess. Do you have an opinion on organic versus paid search? And for our listeners, organic is people who find you naturally versus like buying ads for keywords.
Yeah, for sure. So I will mention that I haven't really tried a lot of paid ads and I haven't had a lot of success with it. Like I haven't found a formula where you can dump money into it and get jobs. So I'm a little biased. So I do prefer SEO just because, I mean, there's kind of pros and cons. So with SEO, the reason I like it is because it's long term, and once it's kind of operating, it continues operating, barring major algorithm changes or, getting your listing suspended, stuff like that. Like once you're ranking in the local search, like you're probably going to maintain some sort of ranking unless, some other competitors are really working on the SEO, which is why also that you should work on yours. Like SEO isn't like something you just like do for like 6 months and stop. Like no, it has to be ongoing to actually maintain kind of that defensive position. But the return is like if you're doing it yourself, especially, is kind of like infinite, right? Because I mean, for example, like so it took us 8 months to get to around $10,000 a month, and then around that time is when we started really breaking it onto the front page for kind of the major search terms, and then like literally a month and a half later, 2 months, we were doing $45,000 a month. So basically,
Wow.
yeah, like 4x return. Like I think growth that year was like 600%. So first year we finished at like 115,000, and then second year was like like 600 some $1,000 in sales.
That's amazing.
Yeah, like
Very amazing.
it was really stressful too, growing that fast, because it's really really tough to find the labor supply. So it's a good problem to have, but to generate that sales volume with ads would cost you like, I'm gonna say maybe even millions of dollars. I don't actually know, but like they're not cheap, and it's just like you need an insane budget. But having said that, like ads are really good to get jobs right away, because with ads like you can have one up in an hour and you just set your budget and you're good to go. And so they're really good for that initial sort of traction. Problem with me is like I didn't know how to run them like well, and wasn't really sure if we were profiting or not off these jobs. But I mean, it is like another channel, and eventually, it's probably a good idea to, once you have some cash coming in, like have the SEO work being done and, ongoing, and then divert some of that cash flow into ads as well, so that you can further sort of, keep the schedule busy and hire more people and whatnot.
That's amazing. Congrats. What are your margins like? I don't know. I'm just throwing a dart, like 20, 30, 40% margins after everything's said and done. Do you mind sharing any insight into that?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, so that's pretty much around that percentage. So the way we do it, we operate with a contract model, and we pay a percentage of our fee to the client. So the contractors get 60% of whatever we're charging the clients. And then our gross margin is the remaining 40%. Since all of our payments are by credit card, it's more like 37% as a gross margin. And then I personally take about 10%, and so does my partner, and then the rest kind of.
Yeah, the rest you cut out a little bit, but it goes to retained earnings. You can grow the business, you can reinvest, right? Dude, that's amazing. Super proud of you. So, where did you find this partner? Was it through Facebook?
Yeah, so we actually went to high school together. So I knew him previously, and it was kind of weird enough. He was like sort of in the same boat as I. Like he wasn't, really sure where his job was going to take him or whatever. I think he was also in school at the time, and he was also just talking about, business stuff, and then we sort of landed on this together and kind of ran from there.
No, it's very interesting because it's almost like not quite a marketplace, but it is a little bit, because you're like the hub with a brand, of course. And, a client doesn't have to know who the contractor is. They just know that you've got a standard of work, and I'm sure you have a vetting process, and who's good, who's not. And did you clean on your first job, or did you go to contractor right away?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Like the client doesn't necessarily need to know that you have contractors, and you're kind of solving problems for both sides. So the client wants, good cleaning experience and all that's involved with that. And then the cleaner typically just wants jobs, and they don't know how to do that. So you're kind of filling that gap, right? You know how to market, you know how to get the clients, but you also know how to like manage jobs and ensure a good job is done. So it's kind of like a weird, like, yeah, in a way, yeah, it is like a marketplace, but it's, almost more like a broker.
Yeah, broker's a good
Yeah.
term.
So
Yeah, I was
it's,
going to just say that.
yeah, and so like there is an issue with that in California. I'm not going to get into it, but basically, if you follow the contractor model, they want you to be called a cleaning referral agency. Like literally, that has to be in your name, because they do want you to actually let people know that you're not, a classic employee style cleaning company. But the first job, yeah, so we went with contractors right away, because again, just like having, learned so much from the other guys sharing their models and whatever. At the time, I was still working with my dad, so I didn't have, a ton of flexibility. So I wanted to ideally have someone else do the work right away and just focus on the business side from the start. So we did find one cleaning contractor. It did end up working out in the long term. He was kind of shitty, to be honest. But, for the first couple months, it was great because he was okay taking, just the odd job that came in because he had his own jobs. So it really made it easy to just focus on the business and not have to worry about making sure that there was enough cleans for this guy. Because that's kind of one of the big, questions I see for people starting out. Like, how do I make sure that their schedule's busy? And it's like, well, it's not going to be. So if you're, doing the contractor model, like just look for someone that has their own jobs and is going to be okay with not being always busy, at least from your end. And then when we had that crazy growth spurt, we did actually have to jump in on a few cleans. One in particular, I remember it was a larger house, so it was a good chunk of change. And the lady was like just super, super nice, such a lovely lady, and she wanted bi-weekly, and we were at risk of basically losing her if we couldn't find somebody. So I kind of just said to myself, I was like, listen, like this is worth stepping in for, even though, because like my concern, it's not doing the work, it's doing the work poorly. Like I'm not a cleaner. And so, there was also the risk of just still doing a bad job regardless and losing that client. But she ended up being happy. And, 5 years later, she's still a client. So
Yeah.
it was worth it.
So you've been at this for a while. That's awesome. So funny you mentioned that about, risk of losing clients and all that. So what I found was I did something similar. So a lot of people wanted about $70 to do a one-time cut. And they're like, okay, you got to do weekly. You have to do a contract. I'm like, I don't got this kind of money. I don't even want that. I just want someone to show up. So what I did was on my first listing, I said, no contract. I used to do lawn aeration in university. So the pitch was, it was door-to-door sales, and it was, okay, we'll do the front of the yard for like 40, we'll do front and back for like 50, 60. So it's like an instant value proposition. So I kind of threw that out there, and then I said like an extra $10 for weeds. So I essentially had like a small, medium, large pricing model. And because it was just me, I did it cheaper than everyone else. I think my most expensive was like 50 or 60. And, I was doing it a couple hours after work. I still had daylight. My tagline was, talking to family and friends. It was like getting paid to go to the gym and get a tan. So I really didn't mind it. Got me out of the house. And what I realized was like, time crunch, more bookings, more people. It was kind of, it became like you almost want to get to the point where it's overwhelming, and then you delegate or you hire. So that's where that kind of idea came from. And so I had moved into a duplex, and I've got the upstairs, and I was cleaning as well, right? And just to get bookings, I wasn't leaving gaps. So I was cleaning at like 8 a.m. Like you, I hate cleaning. I'm not a fan. But I do the basics. And, just like a month ago or so, I hired a couple kind of contractors as well, right? And the first thing I told anyone who, like, I posted on Indeed, by the way, in case anyone's wondering. So I said, okay, it's part-time work. This is basically just me as a business. You can help out, no guarantee of hours, but if you want to make extra cash, I'll e-transfer you the money. And we have e-transfer in Canada, which is nice and easy. So yeah, I mean, I think being very upfront with people, and back to the marketplace, the reason why I bring this up is because anyone listening, if you're a small business owner today, you're going to empower someone's life. So the biggest thing is there's a roadblock of how do you get to a good job that pays well, that you enjoy, that you don't hate, which most people hate their jobs. Because I find if you're not like moving up, making more money, or it's just draining and stressful, right? And like people think you have to go to school. So someone who is already, busing to work or raising a family or having just a really hard time with life, life is getting more expensive. Like everything's gone up, right? Gas prices are insane, food. So there's such a crunch, right? And, starting a business is not for everyone. But what about people who say, I have extra time, I can use my skill to clean, but I don't want to Uber, I don't want to deliver DoorDash. So that's why I love this model. How many contractors are you working with? Like 10, 20 or?
Yeah, so I think around 20 cleaners right now.
Yeah, that's 20 mouths you're feeding, right? You're growing, empowering people. Like I was right at the end of the season, I'm paying people hundreds of dollars, let's say almost $500 a month. That's a car payment. You can do a lot with that cash. And my idea was, okay, well, copy and paste. I was going to consider the door to door. Very good points about SEO. I got to brush up on that. But speaking of the cleaning model, I told people, I said, okay, I've got an Airbnb, come clean for me, and I need consistent work. I'm paying about $50. It's between 2 and 3 hours of work, and I charge about 70 on the listing. So my goal is a bit of a buffer to cover for like cleaning supplies and things like that. But getting your time back is huge, right? You're not a slave to your own business. So I find that just stepping outside, you cut a bit of your margin and all your time back is like super useful, right?
Yeah, that for me was, to be honest, the biggest goal. Obviously we all want to make millions of dollars and whatever, but I think that the real value is in the flexibility. And that's kind of why I said at the beginning of this discussion was like, if you run a business, set it up in a way that you enjoy it. And for me, it was very much handing off the operation to an admin person. So basically, it's at a point now. I mean, it has been like since the last 4 years where all the day-to-day stuff is done by somebody else. And so all that I have to do now is just kind of be available. So we basically have WhatsApp group chats with everybody. So we have one for the admin group, and then all the cleaners, and then the two admin girls are in the chats with all the cleaners too. And then I just kind of like oversee essentially. So basically, I just will check my WhatsApp with my phone once in a while if I see a message or whatever, and just kind of read what's going on. Like, is there any issues? Or sometimes there's like nothing at all if it's just like a really easygoing day. And then, if the admin girls have any sort of like issues or questions, they can just message me and I'll respond or look into it or whatever. And so a nice thing is, having moved here from Europe away from my whole family, the last number of summers, I've been able to just, go back to visit without thinking twice about it. Like the real bottleneck is my girlfriend's job because submit for time off and she only gets, a certain number of weeks and whatever. And so, I'd be able to go for longer if she had flexibility, but regardless, it's still nice not having to ask anybody. We can just be like, oh, okay, I want to go visit over here or visit this person, and you just kind of leave, right? So I think that's where the real benefit is for sure.
Yeah, totally. And I think you've cracked the code. And, the realization of even if you have a good paying job, but you work for somebody, you don't really own your time because 2 weeks a year is nothing. And I barely take my vacation in my day job, which I still have in sales. And that's just how it goes, right? People are coached to grind it out and, make the most amount of money for other people. And somewhere in between, you have to like, I don't care if it's 1 hour a week, just devote some thinking, some meditation, some time to try things. And this is the only way it's going to happen. No one's going to hand you a turnkey business, but I'm pretty sure like if you're somewhat passionate and you want to try something, you can fumble and learn and discover. Like this is why I love these conversations, because if you talk to yourself day one versus today, the version of yourself today is very knowledgeable, very experienced, knows how to run everything, but it comes from learning. And I love that you didn't go to business school. That's like the best thing ever because it throws all conventional wisdom on its head. And maybe there's that one person who's going to be like, oh yeah, you got lucky, which I hate that term. No, you clearly worked hard. You were smart about it. And, I really admire that. So a couple questions. When it comes down to these contractors, how does insurance work? My biggest fear, like I've got someone upstairs that I don't really care. Like I know what's there. I'm not worried about theft. But if I were to, contract someone for like a clean in another Airbnb, which I had thought about, how do you handle that insurance aspect? Or do these contractors have their own? And I guess they got their own reputation, so they're not going to, play around.
Yeah, it's really, really tough to figure out. Unfortunately, it's kind of one of those sort of, I don't know, you're always going to kind of be in a gray area, probably if you're using contractors for insurance. So I think that in the US, Hiscox will offer insurance for your contractors, whereas I don't think Canada has an equivalent. So your only options are like basically make sure that they have their own insurance, which is definitely an issue. A lot of guys don't, or just like pay for it. So it's not crazy expensive. I think it's like It's around 60, $70 a month for just like basic insurance. That's all you need for house cleaning. You don't need any crazy like liability stuff, or just like, not totally recommended, but just sort of like wing it and, hire people with no insurance, and you don't really do anything to try and cover them, and then just kind of hope for the best, which I wouldn't really recommend because things will go wrong. But yeah, we just kind of found that you just have to find something that works for your market, and that's kind of a crappy answer, but it's, in my experience, is the truth. And what we've kind of found is that some of the cleaners will have insurance, but then the others will probably have to pay for it. But a lot of them are okay to like splitting the costs. So again, this is where you got to like do some math and see what kind of value they're bringing in. But if someone's working for you more or less full time, and again, the insurance is 60, $70, like you may want to give them half or just pay for all of it. So if they're getting paid, let's say $4,000 a month, that means they're making you like double that. So it's worth the extra couple bucks just to kind of make sure that you're covered on both ends there. Because one thing I will say is that the biggest time suck in this business is client issues. So literally, if you have a single client where they're upset or there has been damage, like that's going to take up potentially days or weeks depending on the issue. And let's say you have like 10 cleaners, that $600 has some value to me in that sense, because if you can avoid those scenarios, like it'll just make your life so much easier.
I just want to say, Boris, you just beat me right to it. I was just waiting for you to finish your point and ask you about customer complaints and how, because every business has, especially with people, with customers, like you will have some sort of maybe challenges, let's say. So do you guys have a department or a team that can take care of these complaints generally, or would upper management, i.e. you, maybe your partner, would get involved in these situations a bit more because it's case by case basis?
Yeah, so in general, the admin staff will take care of complaints. So the vast majority are just like basic things where like, hey, this was missed, or I'm unhappy because of this issue or whatever. Kind of routine stuff. But if it is, more serious, which isn't that often, to be honest, it's not really that, we have serious issues. It's more that the client is just like unreasonable, and that the admin person just can't find a solution for them because they don't really want a solution. You get those people too where like, you offer free clean and they're still pissed, and it's like, okay, well, like, I don't understand what else you want. And so they kind of come to one of us where we just sort of basically, it's kind of funny, like you basically say the same thing as the admin person, but for whatever reason, like because you're the business owner, like now they're gonna listen to you. And so they didn't want the free clean from the admin staff, but when you're like, hey, yeah, I understand, blah blah, we'll totally like avoid it, and they're now all of a sudden happy with that. So that's kind of the general flow we have for complaints, but typically that's the admin staff for the more basic stuff.
Yeah. So funny story about that with the lawn stuff. I made these little signs, right? And they're terrible because I went for the cheapest cost just to get something out there. So I had this like paper with a spike in the ground that was plastic, and they'd fall apart in the rain. They really didn't last a week, but I started trying to put them at like stop signs in my local area. And, I had the email and phone number on each side. And I got this email saying like, I don't need your services. That's my property. What are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was like, public, city owned boulevard. I was like, let me know what your favorite bottle of scotch or whiskey is, and I'll send you a bottle, and didn't hear anything. So I think, yeah, that was my way to kind of solve that. But, I think some customers come looking for a fight. They come and you know what it is? I've noticed in COVID, you never know what someone's dealing with, if they have health issues or they just got like, personal. They just want to rage on someone and say, how dare you as a business owner? Because business owners are supposed to be infallible and like never screw up and all this kind of stuff. But I know Cal talks about it a lot. It's how you fix the problem. And, just be a person, just be human and say, we screwed up, we'll fix it. And, listen. And I find that empathizing with people and say, yeah, I know you're frustrated. I get it. I see your point, as opposed to just saying, we're right, you're wrong, and start a battle. You don't really get anywhere. So good for you. Yeah. And why I brought up the insurance thing was like, the last thing I want is like, making $500,000 a month on this cleaning gig, and, someone's $50,000 diamond ring goes missing, and what do I do? Right. So that's kind of my first thought. But of course, like you said it, I think just wing it just means try and keep going. And eventually, like, you can park some money for not theft necessarily, but customer issues, as you said, and things like, I always say that like if someone's unhappy, go out of your way to make them happy. It'll take a lot of time, right? Like some of these lawns, I was spending way more time than I should have. And I will say at the end of the day, though, if they're a recurring customer and they're always unhappy, just say, I don't think we're a good fit, or we don't specialize in this. Cause when you have too many customers, it becomes not worth your time, I find. Did you find that like where some of your customers you just kind of fizzled out with? It's just eventually just too high maintenance, right?
Yeah, so there's definitely sort of this like amateur approach that even I did, and I often see is where the new business owner like wants every single client to be their client, and you realize pretty quickly that that's not the case, and you don't want every single client. You want the like clients that are the best fit to your business. And so yeah, we've definitely had clients that have been exactly that, like recurring clients, but for some reason they're just like never happy with the service. And part of me wonders like, why don't you just like fire us? If it's been an issue for months, like why are you still paying us money? Which kind of like leads me to believe that maybe they're just like that sort of individual where they're not really satisfied, or just kind of like a negative person or whatever. And then whether we keep them or not kind of depends on how the cleaner feels about it. So like some clients, they're not super, positive, but the cleaner is kind of like, yeah, whatever, like, they don't really say anything. I just do my job and I get my pay for it and it's all good. Whereas sometimes, like, depending on the client, they actually start to be negatively affected by it. So they start dreading going to this person's house. They don't want to do their cleanings. They're just like morale kind of starts deteriorating. And so at that point, it becomes a liability, right? Because okay, like not only is this person kind of, just being difficult, but they're starting to erode the confidence of your staff. And that's really dangerous because now, it can like lead to like job dissatisfaction or burnout or whatever. And, in services like ours where you need labor, especially skilled labor, because, there is an element of skill, even though it's cleaning, you want to make sure you're protecting that because that's what's going to bring in, new clients and new revenue. And so we've had a couple of times where just like that's happened. And so we go to the client and we're like, hey, unfortunately, it's just like, yeah, poor fit, or we can't service expectations or whatever, and just kind of like, try to part ways nicely as best you can.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because back to that marketplace analogy, you're essentially helping your contractors thrive, and money's money, right? If they don't have to even really interact, it's kind of just you're the buffer of, okay, the angry mood once in a while. So you had mentioned something about a deep clean. I think when I was looking for a cleaner myself, I got a bunch of quotes. I couldn't find anyone for less than $150, and then a deep clean was like $400 if you're staging your house or selling it. Do you have different pricing models? How does your quoting work, or do you just go by square footage?
Yeah, that's a good question. So to be honest, when I first started, I just found another company that had online booking and just copied their prices. Because I had zero experience in the industry, so I was like, I literally have no idea what to charge. But after booking a few jobs, I found that the hourly equivalent we were charging, because we do flat rates, well, it's like a really weird situation, but typically it's flat rates. And so like the hourly equivalent just wasn't making sense. I think it was like $30 an hour or something around that lines. And, for like an actual company, that billing rate doesn't make sense. You're never going to make money. So I basically just sort of started collecting data on, like how long does a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom house take? How long does a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment take? Stuff like that. And I just slowly started tweaking the numbers a little bit. And you can actually see the pricing. So we have an online booking tool, and it's literally like you can set it up, put in your details, you get your price, and you book in. And if you haven't, misrepresented the size or the state of your home, then it's fairly accurate. But basically, yeah, so if you just go to like westmaids.com and click on the book now button, you can kind of see all the pricing there and kind of how it lines up and play around with that if you want. But typically the way we do it is like we kind of try to judge the size of the house based on a number of bedrooms. And that's not perfect because some people have, for example, like a 3-bedroom house, but one is like a spare bedroom. So they select 2-bedroom. Because logically they're like, oh well, it's like 2 getting clean, so that's what I want. But then that actually alters the entire pricing flow for the rest of it. And so there is some issue there, but that's kind of like our approximation for square footage. Because I found also with square footage, like it's tough to find, a range because not every house is, going to be exactly the same square footage. There is, some variation. But also clients don't know. sometimes their house will be like 4,000 square feet and they're like, I don't know, like 2,800 square feet. And so that changes like, the cost in dollars. And so it's just easier to kind of try and approximate from just the number of bedrooms. And then we do have the extras depending. So, if you just do like the bedrooms, bathrooms, you'll get a standard clean. And then you can add on whether you want deep clean, move out cleaning, windows, stuff like that.
Right on. That makes a lot of sense because, I'm just on your site now and, I click through and it says you're 60 seconds away from a sparkling home. I'm excited. I want to hire you right away. That's amazing. Like it's a very nice site. I know. No, it really is like a call to action and very purposeful. Someone knows why they're there. So really love it. And so how do you get a standardized process? Like I'm sure the cleaners know what they're doing, but how do you measure if a customer's happy? How do they know if they got a clean house? Do you have someone with like the worst possible condition with garbage everywhere? And then, do you tell them we're going to have to charge you more? Like, how do you navigate that? Do you have a process for every contractor to follow? And how do you know if a customer's happy?
Yeah, it sounds a bit tricky because you can't technically tell a contractor how to do their job. So ironically, the contractor regulations in Canada are less strict than the US because typically it's the opposite. They get a lot more freedom for most things. So it's actually fairly flexible in Canada to run the contractor model. But one of the main things is that you can't tell them how to do their job. And it's already kind of a gray area because when we send a job, we say, like, this is the time and this is the scope. And that's kind of like, if it's a contractor, you're supposed to just like send them the job and then they get it done on their own time so that we're not like managing your schedule. And that's where kind of just like, starts to get kind of complicated. So we try to like not cross those lines if possible. So that's kind of one of the big downsides is you can't have like a proper standardized process where it's like, here's a checklist for everything you should be doing every single time to this exact specification. But what we try and do is find cleaners that have experience and that are interested in doing a good job so they, have some sort of pride in their work. And then we kind of just run them through our business model and, what the client expects to be done, not what we want to do, but like what the client will expect based on level of service. And hopefully, that they understand and they agree. And then we'll actually do a couple of test cleanings as well initially before we kind of just send them out in the wild. And so typically this will be like either one of us in the company or like a family friend or something, or even like a trusted client, someone we know like really well. And we'll just give them like, we'll basically just charge cost for the clean and just tell them like, hey, we like really want you to have a look, like everything about this person, like, from their presentation when they arrive to like, how they interact, the actual quality of cleaning, like whatever, let us know what they're like, because all that's really important. And then when you're doing the actual jobs, so our system has an automatic follow-up, and basically it'll email and text the customer. I think it's like towards the end of the day, like after the cleaning, it'll basically just be like, hey, like just checking in to make sure that everything is good. Like, how do you feel about your clean? And then it's just like 3 little happy faces. Well, I guess one's only happy because one's a sad face, one's kind of like a neutral face, and one's a happy face. So it makes it easy for the client to, very quickly kind of give us quick feedback. And then once they click one of those, it'll actually open up like a little text box as well where they can submit comments. And that kind of helps to, most importantly, catch the unhappy ones, because the real risk in missing those clients is that they may not actually call you to complain, because a lot of people feel awkward about, the phone, which is natural. So if they're unhappy, they may not call you, but they may, submit like an email or text feedback. But in cases like where they don't, you have the risk of them going straight to like Google, for example, and leaving it there. So if you can intercept that, then you're going to kind of, minimize the reputational damage that you might be at risk for in some cases.
I'm the same way in the sense that if I'm unsatisfied with something with the service, usually I don't call. But if there's a way that, I get a survey or whatnot, or I can make a comment, I would say what I need to say in the text. So that is brilliant in trying to reach out to the customer and try to get that sorted, because it is all about word of mouth. Someone is going to ask me about the business. If I'm not satisfied, then, it's going to pass on. And like I said, everyone's online and it can leak pretty quick and can be pretty damaging. So I definitely think that's simple yet amazing idea.
Yeah, and it's really tough to get the positive reviews. That's kind of the crappy thing is that, unhappy clients are happy to drag you through the mud all over the internet. Like they'll spend hours doing it.
Yeah.
Whereas, happy clients, they have their cleaning done, they're happy, they move on with their lives. So it's really hard to get those positive reviews.
Yeah, I find in sales, my day job, we actually, we had a coach come in to talk about Google reviews, and he had mentioned that you got to ask, like
Absolutely.
ask for the 5-star, ask for, your biggest fans to write. And I'm surprised because when I got the reviews for, the lawns, I loved what they wrote, and I had no clue that they were thinking that. They were just super happy about the work. But, you get to read what they love about what you do, and then you can throw that on your website and say, this is what we're good at. So yeah, I think it's an important fact because people only get the bad side. And you know what's funny? These people who complain, they're professionals. They love to complain about everyone and everything. And
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
can click their profile and see their 1-stars over 5 businesses in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And what are they chasing? Like, I see you got gift cards on your site, so I guess they just want free gift cards. That's probably what they're after. But yeah, it makes sense. And as we wrap up here, do your contractors have their own? I guess they bring their own tools and supplies, and you can't tell them what to do. But I guess you can. I saw you can check off like if people want, the walls done or different features, so they can you can give your contractor like a quote printout and show them exactly what the client expects, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So when we schedule them, we can just like email out the schedule for. We do the week, but you can kind of set the time frame to whatever you want. And yeah, that's literally what they'll get in their email is just like a list of every single job. And so you'll have like the client name, address, the service level that was booked, and then like any additional extras. And yeah, it's kind of what I was saying, and that sort of weird gray area. Like we're not saying like you have to do walls for this clean this way. It's more like, hey, the client is requesting you do them.
Awesome. Yeah, I just want to thank you for coming on. It's been an amazing hour of really insightful stuff, and you're rocking it. Keep it up. And, as we wrap up here, do you have anything you want to plug? And do you have any goals for getting into the new year?
Yeah. First of all, yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you guys for a bit. Always fun talking to other guys in business and whatnot. In terms of plugging, not really. I don't have anything for sale yet. But yeah, goals, I think just to be honest, like coronavirus has definitely disrupted our business. Like we lost, a good percentage of clients and just like disruptions in terms of labor and even just like you're saying, like people's, just moods have been more tricky to navigate. So hopefully kind of refocus and try to get back to where we were. Like we've seen some of it come back, but it's still not where it was. But I think just given, the last 18 months, I think it's going to take a little bit of a different approach. So hoping to really kind of focus on that work and, see if we can keep growing.
Awesome stuff, Boris. And where can people find you, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, the easiest place is probably on Twitter. So my username would just be Vujanov. I'm always happy to chat or whatever. So if when any of these listeners have questions or whatever, just reach out. I'm happy to help you guys out.
Right on. We will. We'll make sure we put your handle and website in the show notes. Thanks again. And when we're in Calgary, Cal's a huge race car driver, so we're gonna come to the driver track too when we're out there.
Yeah, it's. I think it's supposed to be done somewhat soonish. It's come a long way, so it's looking pretty sweet to be honest. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Maybe you can catch up next time on that stuff too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. You're always welcome.
Awesome. Take care.
Thanks again for having me.
You got it. Cheers. So with that said, let's wrap up today's episode. Thank you for listening to another episode of Methodical Millions, where you can better your future and better yourself.
Thanks, everyone.